Calaris was dying. From orbit, the once luminous world looked like a fractured jewel, its oceans boiling into vapor, its continents split by glowing scars of molten fire. Above it, the sky wasn't sky anymore. It was war. Commander Veka stood at the center of the flagship Eternal Dawn, her claws gripping the edge of her command console so tightly the alloy beneath them bent. Every screen around her screamed chaos, failing shields, collapsing formations, and worst of all, silence. Not the absence of sound. The presence of it. The enemy. They've broken the outer ring, an officer reported, voice trembling despite training. 7th and 9th fleets are gone. Gone, Veka snapped, or destroyed. The officer hesitated. That was answer enough. Gone. Not wreckage, not debris, not even radiation signatures. Just erased. Veka forced herself to breathe. Around her, the bridge crew struggled to keep up with a battle that no longer followed logic. Ships vanished mid-maneuver. Entire squadrons blinked out between heartbeats. Targeting systems locked onto enemies that didn't exist until they did. The silence is advancing toward inner orbit, another officer said. At current rate, planetary collapse is inevitable within 2 cycles. 2 cycles? That was all her world had left. Below them, billions of lives still clung to hope, unaware that hope had already failed. Evacuation status, she demanded. Less than 3% off-world. Transport lanes are compromised. Of course they were. The silence didn't just attack fleets, it dismantled escape. It erased futures. A violent tremor shook the ship as something unseen tore through a nearby cruiser. For a split second, its hull appeared on screen, then folded inward like paper and disappeared. No explosion. No trace. The bridge fell quiet. Even the alarms seemed muted, as if the universe itself feared making noise. Veka straightened slowly, forcing strength into limbs that wanted to freeze. She had commanded for decades. She had faced pirates, rebellions, even interstellar wars. But this wasn't war. This was extinction. Commander, a young communications officer whispered, we're receiving nothing from allied systems, no reinforcements, no responses. Veka closed her eyes briefly. They were alone. Truly alone. Her species had always believed the galaxy was vast, filled with allies, possibilities, civilizations waiting beyond the next star. But when it mattered, there was nothing. Her gaze hardened. Open all channels, she said. The officer blinked, Commander. All of them, military, civilian, deep space relays, everything. Realization spread across the bridge. You're not calling for reinforcements, the officer said quietly. No, Veka replied. She stepped forward, her voice steady despite the weight pressing against her chest. I'm calling for anyone. The transmission array hummed to life, pushing beyond standard limits. Frequencies long abandoned lit up. Unknown bands, ancient channels, even theoretical spectrums crackled with energy. This is Commander Veka of the Calaris Defense Armada, she began. To any who can hear this anywhere. Her voice faltered for just a fraction of a second. Then she continued. We are under attack by an unknown entity designated the Silence. It does not negotiate. It does not conquer, it erases. Another tremor rocked the ship. Lights flickered. She didn't stop. Our fleets are gone. Our world is dying. If this message reaches you, know that this threat will come for you too. The words echoed into the void. Desperate. Honest. Final. We do not ask for salvation, she said quietly. Only that our existence is remembered. Behind her, one by one, consoles went dark. The last defense grid collapsed. Sensors spiked violently. And then, it appeared. A tear in space itself, stretching across orbit like a wound in reality. From it emerged something vast, shapeless, wrong. A structure that shifted as you looked at it, refusing to hold a single form. The Silence. Not its fleet. Not its fragments. The source. The bridge temperature dropped. Or maybe that was fear. Veka stared at it, unable to look away. So this is how we end, someone whispered. The entity pulsed once, and every system screamed in response. A weapon began charging, energy gathering in a way that defied physics, logic, understanding. One strike. That was all it would take. Veka lowered herself into her command seat. For the first time in her life, she had no orders left to give. Transmission complete, the officer said softly. Signal dispersing, but... But what? Veka asked. The officer frowned, confusion cutting through fear. There's interference, something responding. Veka's head snapped up. Impossible. The screen flickered. Static surged across every channel. The charging weapon outside grew brighter. Closer. Final. Then, a signal broke through. Weak. Distant. But real. The bridge froze. Source unknown, the officer whispered. Decryption in progress. The message resolved slowly. 2 words. Clear. Undeniable. We hear you. And for the first time since the war began, the silence paused for a single fragile moment. The war stopped. Not ended. Not slowed. Stopped. Even the entity looming over Kelaris, the vast, shifting mass of the silence, seemed to hesitate, its weapon still gathering impossible energy but no longer advancing. On the bridge of the eternal dawn, no one moved. No one breathed. Play it again, Commander Veka said. The communications officer swallowed and obeyed. The message echoed across the chamber once more. We hear you. Not distorted. Not broken. Clear. Deliberate. Real. Veka stepped closer to the console, her mind racing. Trace the origin now. Fingers flew across the controls. Systems that had been seconds from failure suddenly found new purpose. Signal path is inconsistent, the officer muttered. It's bouncing across multiple relays, some of them inactive for centuries. Just give me a location. A pause. Then, we have a probable source. The coordinates appeared. Veka stared. Her secondary eyes narrowed in confusion. That sector is uncharted. Yes, Commander. No trade routes, no colonies, no registered civilizations. The officer hesitated again. Correct. Veka felt something shift in her chest. Hope. No. Suspicion. Then who answered us? Before anyone could respond, the main display flickered violently. The incoming signal surged. Visual transmission detected, another officer shouted. They're establishing direct contact. On screen, Veka ordered. Static flooded the bridge, lines of interference tearing across the projection. For a heartbeat, there was nothing but noise. Then the image stabilized. A figure appeared. Bipedal, symmetrical, soft-featured compared to most known species, with smooth skin and 2 forward-facing eyes locked directly onto her. No visible armor. No fear. Just focus. I am Admiral Elias Ward, the being said, voice calm, measured. United Earth Defense Fleet. The translation systems struggled for half a second. Then aligned. The words became clear. Veka stared. This was the one who answered. One individual. From a species no one had ever catalogued. Her voice sharpened. You received our transmission. Yes. You understand the threat. A brief pause. Then, yes. Then you understand that you cannot win this, she said. You need to withdraw immediately. Whatever system you came from, hide it, protect it. The human didn't react the way she expected. No fear. No urgency. Instead, a faint crease formed at the corner of his eyes. Not amusement. Not arrogance. Something else. We didn't come to win, Commander, he said quietly. Veka felt irritation spark. Then why are you here? The answer came without hesitation. Because you're still fighting. The simplicity of it hit harder than any weapon. Before she could respond, the feed widened. And everything changed. Behind the human, space moved. At first, it looked like distortion, like the war itself had begun tearing reality apart in new ways. Then shapes emerged, dark silhouettes against the stars. 1, then 10, then hundreds. Veka stepped forward, her breath catching. No. The void filled with motion. Ships sleek, angular, unlike any known design, slid out of invisibility. Their hulls shimmered with layered armor, their formations impossibly precise. More appeared, and more. Thousands. An entire fleet hidden in plain sight. Waiting. Watching. For how long? How long have you been there? Veka whispered. The human's gaze didn't waver. Long enough. A chill ran through her. Not fear of them. Fear of what it meant. If a species could hide a fleet like this, what else could they do? Alarms suddenly erupted across the bridge. Commander, the entity is reacting, an officer shouted. On screen, the massive form of the silence shifted. Its attention, its full, terrifying awareness, locked onto the new arrivals. The weapon it had been charging flickered. Adjusted. Retargeted. The battlefield realigned in an instant. Veka's pulse spiked. They've noticed you, she said sharply. You need to leave now. For the first time, the human leaned slightly closer to the display. And there it was again. That strange expression. Calm. Steady. Unshaken. No, Admiral Ward said. Behind him, the human fleet began to move. Not retreating. Advancing. Weapons charging in perfect synchronization. Formations tightening with mechanical precision. Every ship aligned toward a single target. The silence. Veka felt something dangerous stir in her chest again. Hope. Real hope. And that terrified her more than anything. Human fleet, Ward said, his voice carrying across every open channel, alien and human alike. There was no hesitation. No dramatic pause. Just certainty. Engage. The first human ship surged forward. Then the rest followed. A tidal wave of steel and fire crashing into the void. Straight toward annihilation. Veka watched, unable to look away. They're insane, one of her officers whispered. No, she said softly. Her eyes locked onto the advancing fleet. They're committed. Outside, the silence fired. A beam of pure, unstoppable erasure tore across space. And the human fleet flew directly into it. The beam hit. A blinding line of absolute erasure carved through space, silent, colorless, unstoppable. It didn't burn, it didn't explode. It simply removed. Veka's breath caught in her throat as the first line of human ships vanished into it. Impact in 3-2. The officer never finished. Because the impossible happened. The beam distorted. Not stopped. Not blocked. Bent. The human fleet didn't scatter. They didn't panic. Instead, their formation tightened, ships shifting angles with flawless precision as a faint, shimmering field ignited around them. The beam curved, sliding across their hulls like water over stone. They're riding it, someone whispered in disbelief. Veka leaned forward. What kind of shielding does that? On screen, Admiral Ward's voice cut in calmly, as if discussing routine maneuvers. Graviton shear fields, they redirect incoming energy vectors. A second voice, human younger, crackled through comms. Also occasionally rip us apart, sir. A beat. Ward didn't react, maintain formation. The fleet surged forward. Through the beam. Through annihilation itself. Then, they struck. Railguns thundered first, massive projectiles accelerating to impossible speeds, slamming into the shifting surface of the silence. Where they hit, reality rippled violently, as if the entity itself struggled to maintain cohesion. Missiles followed, hundreds of them, weaving through space like living things before detonating in cascading bursts of energy. Then came the lances, focused beams that didn't just strike, but cut, carving glowing scars into the enemy's form. For the first time, the silence reacted. It recoiled. A subtle movement. A distortion in its shape. But enough. "They're damaging it," Veka said, her voice barely above a whisper. No one had ever said that before. Across the battlefield, human ships pressed the attack relentlessly. Their movements weren't perfect, but they were adaptive, aggressive, unyielding. They fought like a species that had learned the hard way. Victory wasn't given. It was taken. But the silence was not passive. It learned. It always learned. The massive entity pulsed once, then split. Not physically. Functionally. Its surface fractured into countless smaller fragments, each one writhing and twisting before launching outward. Swarms. Living darkness. They moved faster than sensors could track, slamming into the front lines of the human fleet. One ship disappeared instantly. Another twisted violently, its hull folding inward before collapsing into nothing. New threat vectors, a human voice shouted over open comms. Close-range entities, don't let them latch on. Too late. The swarms adapted faster than expected. They didn't just attack. They consumed. A cruiser tried to pull back, its engines flaring, but a mass of darkness wrapped around it, spreading across its hull like liquid night. For a moment it held. Then, it was gone. Veka felt her claws tighten. They're losing ships fast. But something didn't change. The formation. Despite the chaos, despite the losses, the human fleet held its structure. Ships shifted positions instantly to fill gaps. Defensive lines reformed within seconds. Fighters dove into swarms not to escape, but to intercept. To protect. A damaged human frigate, its engines failing, drifted directly into the path of a transport vessel, one of Veka's own. "Collision course," her officer shouted. "Tell them to move," Veka snapped. "They're not responding." The frigate didn't move. Instead, it accelerated, straight into the swarm chasing the transport. The impact was instant. Violent. Final. The swarm collapsed in on itself, destabilized by the explosion. The transport escaped. Veka stared. They sacrificed themselves. No one answered. Because across the battlefield, it was happening again. And again. Human ships placing themselves between danger and others. Not for tactical advantage. Not for survival. But because they chose to. A strange, heavy feeling settled in Veka's chest. Respect, mixed with something deeper. Something she didn't yet understand. "They're not fighting like us," she murmured. "No," her officer replied softly. "They're fighting like they've already accepted death." But even that wasn't enough. Because the silence adapted again. Its swarms changed. Faster, sharper, more precise. They began targeting the human ships' weak points, shield gaps, engine cores, command bridges. One strike, one ship gone, then another, and another. Casualties spiked. Formation strain increased. Even the human fleet couldn't hold forever. On screen, Admiral Ward's expression hardened. "Enemy adaptation rate increasing," an officer reported. "We're losing the edge." Ward didn't respond immediately. He watched, analyzed, calculated. Then, he exhaled slowly. "All right," he said. A quiet shift passed through his voice. "Not panic. Not fear. Decision. They're learning." A pause. Then he gave an order that changed everything. "Prepare Phase 2. Veka's head snapped toward the screen. "Phase what?" Ward looked directly at her. And for the first time, there was something in his eyes she hadn't seen before. Not doubt. Not hesitation. But wait. The kind that came from knowing exactly what came next. You should move your ships back, he said quietly. Veka frowned. Why? Ward didn't answer immediately. Behind him, human ships began pulling into a new formation. Tighter, focused, centering around a single point. Something emerging from the heart of their fleet. Dark, massive, wrong in a way that even the silence seemed to notice. When Ward finally spoke, his voice was almost a warning. Because what happens next? A beat we don't use unless we have no other choice. And in the center of the human formation, a ship began to wake up. The battlefield shifted. Not in chaos, but in control. Human ships began pulling back from the front lines, not in retreat, but with precise intent. Their movements were synchronized, deliberate, forming layered defensive rings that tightened around a single point at the heart of their formation. Veka watched closely, unease creeping through her. This isn't a fallback, she murmured. It's preparation. Across her displays, targeting feeds recalibrated automatically. Every sensor, every system, seemed drawn toward one growing anomaly. At first, it looked like empty space. Then the darkness thickened. A shape emerged. Large, angular, scarred. A vessel unlike the others. Where the rest of the human fleet gleamed with refined engineering, this ship looked worn. Not weak, but used. Its hull bore deep scoring, intentional markings that weren't damage but reminders. Warnings. The translation system struggled, then resolved the text etched along its side. Last resort. Veka felt something cold settle into her core. That's not a warship, one of her officers whispered. No, she said quietly. It's something worse. The silence reacted immediately. The vast entity shifted its attention away from the rest of the battlefield, focusing entirely on the lone vessel now drifting forward. For the first time since its arrival, it hesitated. That alone was enough to send a ripple of unease through Veka's crew. Commander, it recognizes a threat. Veka didn't respond. Her gaze was locked on the screen, where Admiral Ward stood motionless, watching the same unfolding moment. What is that ship? She demanded. A long silence followed. Then Ward spoke. There are lines, he said slowly, that we don't cross. Behind him, alarms flared across the human flagship, but no one moved to stop what was happening. We built that vessel as a deterrent, he continued, a reminder to ourselves. Veka's voice sharpened. A reminder of what? Ward's eyes flicked briefly to the side, toward something unseen. Of what happens when we forget restraint. The last resort moved. Not fast. Not aggressive. Just forward. As if it already knew nothing could stop it. Energy began to build around its hull. At first it was subtle, a faint distortion like heat rising from a surface. Then it intensified. Space itself began to warp. Stars stretched. Light bent. Every sensor on Veka's ship screamed in protest. Energy levels are off scale, an officer shouted. We can't even measure it. Commander, another added urgently, if that discharges at close range, everything in this sector. I know, Veka cut in. Her eyes never left the screen. Admiral, she said sharply, whatever that is, you can't control it. Ward didn't deny it. Instead, he gave a quiet command. All units fall back to minimum safe distance. Human ships responded instantly, pulling away in perfect coordination. Even the alien vessels, Veka's own fleet, instinctively followed, creating a widening void around the lone ship. Only the silence remained close. And it knew. The entity shifted violently, its surface rippling as if trying to reconfigure itself. The swarms it had deployed earlier converged, forming a dense, writhing shield between itself and the last resort. Then, it attacked. A concentrated blast of annihilation surged forward, stronger than before, aimed directly at the approaching vessel. Veka's breath caught. Impact in. The beam hit. For a fraction of a second. Nothing happened. Then, reality broke. The beam didn't just bend this time. It collapsed, pulled inward, dragged toward the ship as if gravity itself had reversed. The last resort absorbed it, fed on it. The energy surrounding the vessel surged violently, spiraling inward before compressing into a single point at its core. Veka felt her entire body tense. "What is it doing?" Ward's voice came softly. "Finishing the equation." The ship stopped, dead center between both fleets. The energy reached critical mass. Space folded inward. Not visually. Physically. Everything nearby, light debris, fragments of ships, was dragged toward a singular point forming at the vessel's center. The silence reacted instantly, attempting to pull away, but it was too late. "Admiral, it's going to collapse the entire region," Veka shouted. Ward closed his eyes for just a moment. Then, fire. The universe inverted. For a heartbeat, there was nothing. No light. No sound. No existence. Then, it exploded outward. A wave of pure absolute force ripped through space, not burning or shattering, but erasing. The swarms vanished first. Then entire sections of the silence's mass, gone as if they had never been. Half its structure, erased, completely. The shockwave continued outward, dissipating only at the very edge of the battlefield. When the light finally faded, the void remained. Empty. Silent. Veka stared, her breath shallow. "What have you done?" But even as the words left her, she saw it. Or rather, what wasn't there, the last resort, was gone. No debris. No signal. No trace. It hadn't survived its own weapon. A human voice crackled faintly over comms. They didn't even try to escape. Another quieter. They knew. Veka felt something heavy settle in her chest. Not fear. Not anger. Something deeper. "They sacrificed themselves," she whispered. On screen, Ward stood motionless, his expression unreadable. "They volunteered," he said quietly. The words carried weight. Choice. Not duty. Not orders. Choice. But the battle wasn't over. Because what remained of the silence still lived. And now, it changed. Its movements lost their cold precision. Its form twisted violently. Unstable. Erratic. And for the first time since it arrived, the silence reacted not with control, but with something else. Something raw. Something dangerous. Veka's voice dropped. "It's angry." Ward's eyes opened slowly. And for the first time, he didn't look calm. He looked ready. "Good," he said. Because the thing that couldn't feel had just learned how to hate, the battlefield did erupt. It unraveled. What remained of the silence no longer moved with cold, surgical precision. Its massive form twisted violently, folding and unfolding in erratic pulses that sent ripples across space itself. The perfect, calculating predator had become something else. Something unstable. Something furious. Veka watched the transformation with a tight breath. "It's lost cohesion," she said. "Its structure isn't holding." "No," one of her officers replied, eyes wide. "It's not losing control." A violent surge tore through the battlefield, ripping apart debris fields and slamming into nearby ships, human and alien alike. "It's lashing out." That was worse. The silence didn't just attack anymore, it reacted. Waves of destructive force radiated outward in unpredictable bursts, catching vessels off guard. A human destroyer tried to reposition. It was caught mid-turn and torn apart by a sudden spatial collapse. Another ship, one of Veka's, was crushed under a shifting gravity well before vanishing completely. "No pattern," the tactical officer shouted. "We can't predict its attacks." Veka clenched her claws. "Then stop predicting. Adapt. All ships, scatter formations, keep moving, don't give it a fixed target." Across the battlefield, both fleets responded instantly. What had been structured combat dissolved into fluid motion, ships weaving, dodging, reacting on instinct more than calculation. And through it all, the humans pressed forward. Veka noticed it immediately. "They're not pulling back," she said. "They're pushing in. Even now. Even after the loss of the last resort. Even with rising casualties." The human fleet advanced. Ward's voice cut through the chaos, steady and sharp. "Maintain pressure, don't give it time to stabilize." A human pilot's voice burst through, strained but fierce. "Sir, with respect, that thing is tearing us apart." "I know," Ward replied. A pause. Then, "That's why we don't stop." Something in his tone changed the air itself. Not reckless, not desperate, resolved. And the fleet followed. Human ships dove into the chaos, attacking from multiple vectors. Smaller craft darted between gravitational distortions, striking at exposed sections of the Silence's shifting form. Alien vessels joined them, no longer hesitant. No longer separate. Veka's fleet moved alongside the humans, covering flanks, intercepting swarms, adapting to the unpredictable storm. At some point, the line between them disappeared. This wasn't two forces anymore. It was one. A human cruiser veered sharply to shield an alien carrier from a sudden surge of spatial collapse. The impact shredded half its hull, but the carrier survived. "Why would they?" one of Veka's officers began. "Because they choose to," she replied quietly. And that realization changed everything. The silence struck again. This time it focused. Its unstable form condensed briefly, just long enough to release a concentrated blast toward the densest cluster of Allied ships. "Incoming," alarm screamed. Veka's eyes widened. They can't evade that in time. Before the blast could land, 3 human frigates broke formation. They didn't dodge. They didn't hesitate. They accelerated directly into the path of the attack. "Negative, pull back," a voice shouted over comms. They didn't. The blast hit. For a fraction of a second, their shields held. Then, they were gone. The energy dissipated just enough for the rest of the fleet to escape. Silence filled the comms for half a heartbeat. Then, "Path's clear," a human pilot said, voice shaking but steady. "Move." Veka felt something shift deep inside her. Not just respect. Understanding. This was how they fought. Not because they couldn't lose, but because they refused to let others lose first. But even sacrifice had limits. The silence adapted again. Its erratic attacks began to narrow, less random, more focused. Its movements stabilized just enough to become deadly again. "It's learning from its own instability," the tactical officer warned. "It's turning chaos into strategy." Veka's pulse spiked. "If it stabilizes fully." "We lose," the officer finished. On screen, Ward watched the same pattern unfold. His expression hardened. "Not yet," he muttered. He studied the shifting mass of the enemy, eyes tracking its movements, not where it was but where it would be. "Looking for something?" "Sir," one of his officers asked. Ward didn't respond immediately. Then, "I see it." Veka turned sharply. "See what?" Ward looked directly at her through the transmission. For a moment, just a moment, it pulls everything inward to stabilize. Her mind raced, a core. "Not exactly," he said, "but close enough. A weakness. Small. Brief. But real." "You can't reach it," Veka said. "It's too deep, too unstable. No ship could survive getting that close." Ward didn't argue. He just nodded slightly. "Yeah." That was when she understood. Her voice dropped. "You're going in." He gave the faintest hint of a smile. "Someone has to." Before she could stop him, before she could even form the words, his flagship broke formation. Not drifting, not maneuvering, charging, straight toward the shifting heart of the silence. "Admiral, no," Veka shouted. But the human fleet didn't try to stop him. They adjusted, covered his path, cleared the way, because they knew. This wasn't a reckless move. This was the plan. Ward's voice came across all channels one last time. "All units, this is it." The chaos intensified as the silence reacted, sensing the threat racing toward its core. Waves of destruction surged forward, trying to stop him, trying to erase him. But he didn't slow, didn't turn, didn't hesitate. Veka stared at the screen, her breath caught between hope and dread. "You won't make it," she whispered. Ward's voice came back, calm as ever. "Probably not." A pause. Then, "Good thing that's not the point." And his ship vanished into the heart of the enemy, the moment Admiral Ward's flagship crossed the threshold. Reality stopped behaving. From the outside, Veka saw only a brief distortion, as if the massive body of the silence rippled to swallow him whole. The ship vanished into its shifting mass without resistance. No explosion. No signal loss. Just absence. "Contact lost," her communications officer shouted. Veka leaned forward. "Reacquire, track anything, radiation, signal echoes, gravitational distortions, anything." "We're trying." But inside was something else entirely. Ward felt it immediately. The instant his ship breached the entity's outer layer, the stars disappeared. Space folded inward, then outward, then sideways, all at once. The concept of direction fractured. "Stabilizers failing," a crew member shouted. "Compensate," Ward said, gripping the command rail as the deck twisted beneath his feet. Gravity surged, then vanished. Then reversed. Crew members slammed against walls, then ceilings, then were suspended midair as if the universe itself had forgotten which way was down. "Navigation is non-linear," the helm officer yelled. "We're not moving through space, we're adjusting through layers," Ward finished calmly. "Keep us oriented toward the core." "Sir, there is no orientation." Ward didn't respond. He didn't need to. Because ahead, something pulsed. A faint glow in the impossible darkness. A rhythm, like a heartbeat. "That's it," he said quietly. "The core, or whatever passed for one." The ship lurched violently as something struck it from within the surrounding mass. The hull groaned, armor buckling under pressures that couldn't exist. "External integrity dropping," an engineer reported. "Whatever this place is, it's trying to rewrite us." "Hold it together," Ward said. "How?" Ward's eyes didn't leave the pulsing light ahead. "Because we're still here." That was enough. For now. Outside, the battle had reached its breaking point. "Commander," Veka's tactical officer shouted. "The entity is focusing inward, it's reacting to something inside." Ward, it knew. It was trying to kill him from within. "Then we don't let it," Veka said instantly. "All ships concentrate fire on outer layers, force it to divide attention." Her fleet responded. So did the humans. A storm of fire crashed into the silence from every direction, railguns, missiles, energy lances, all striking at once, forcing the entity to shift, to react, to defend. Not to destroy, to distract. "Keep pressure on it," she ordered. "Don't let it focus." Because if it did, Ward would die before reaching the core. Inside, the ship shook violently. "Multiple breaches across decks 3 through 6, a crew member shouted. "We're losing sections." Ward didn't look back. "How long to target?" 30 seconds, if we don't get torn apart first." "Then make it 20. The pulsing sphere ahead grew larger. Brighter. Watching. Waiting. The closer they got, the more the environment resisted. Tendrils of darkness peeled away from the surrounding void, lashing toward the ship with terrifying speed. Incoming. The first strike slammed into the hull, punching through outer armor like it wasn't there. The second followed. Then a third. Each impact didn't just damage the ship, it distorted it, bending metal inward as if reality itself rejected its existence. Shields are gone. Then use the hull. That's not how. It is now. The crew held together, not because they believed they would survive, but because they believed they had to reach that point. That core, that chance. Charges ready, an officer called out, awaiting deployment. Ward stepped forward, staring at the pulsing sphere now filling the viewport. It wasn't just a target. It felt aware, as if it saw them, understood them, and hated them. Set detonation sequence, Ward said. A pause. Then, sir, the officer hesitated. There's no extraction path, even if we succeed. Ward nodded once. I know. No speech. No hesitation. Just acceptance. Outside, the silence reacted violently. Its entire form convulsed, pulling inward as if trying to crush whatever was inside it. Commander, Veka's officer shouted, if it collapses fully, it'll take everything with it. Not if we break it first, she snapped. Her eyes locked onto the battlefield. Then, she saw it. A momentary opening. A shift in its outer structure as it redirected energy inward. A gap. Small. Fleeting. But real. There, she shouted. All ships target that section now. Human ships responded instantly. So did hers. A concentrated barrage slammed into the opening, tearing through layers of shifting mass. The entity reacted. But too late. The gap widened. A path. Straight toward where Ward had entered. Admiral, Veka whispered, her voice cutting through every channel. You are not alone. Inside. Ward heard it. Through the distortion. Through the chaos. Her voice. Faint, but clear. He turned slightly. And saw it. Light, breaking through the darkness behind them. Allied fire tearing open the impossible. A path. A chance. They came back, someone whispered. Ward allowed himself the smallest smile. They stayed first. The core pulsed violently now, unstable, aware, threatened. Tendrils surged toward them, faster than before. Deadlier. Impact in 5. Deploy charges, Ward ordered. Devices launched from the ship, embedding into the surface of the glowing sphere. Detonation ready. The tendrils closed in. Too fast. Too close. Ward took a breath. Steady. Final. Trigger it. The charges armed. The core flared. And everything started to collapse inward. The last thing Ward saw was the light consuming everything. And for the first time since the battle began, the silence screamed for one impossible moment. The universe held its breath. Then the light came. It didn't explode outward like a weapon. It unfolded. A radiant surge burst from deep within the writhing mass of the silence, not as fire, but as something cleaner, purer. It spread in expanding waves, illuminating the battlefield in blinding white. Veka shielded her eyes as every sensor on her ship overloaded at once. Energy spike off the scale. Readings are collapsing, no resetting. The entity convulsed violently. Not reacting. Dying. Its massive form cracked from the inside, fractures of light tearing through its shifting surface. The swarms that once moved with terrifying purpose froze mid-motion, then dissolved into nothing. It's working, Veka whispered. The core. Ward had reached it. And now, it was breaking everything. The silence writhed, its structure destabilizing at every level. Segments of its form detached and collapsed into void, entire sections unraveling like threads pulled from existence. But it didn't go quietly. A final surge of power erupted from its core, a desperate, uncontrolled release. Waves of distortion blasted outward, smashing into ships across the battlefield. Brace, Veka shouted. Her flagship shuddered violently as the shockwave hit. Systems flickered. Hull plating screamed under pressure. Across the void, human ships were thrown off course, some spinning wildly, others going dark entirely. Still, no one retreated. "Hold position," she ordered. "Don't lose formation now." Because this was the end. One way or another. The light intensified. Brighter, hotter, closer. The silence collapsed further, its massive presence shrinking, compressing inward as if being pulled into itself. And then, it screamed. Not sound, not vibration. Something deeper. A signal that bypassed translation, bypassed understanding, and went straight to instinct. Every being on every ship felt it. Fear, not theirs. The enemy. Veka's breath caught. "It's afraid," she said. For the first time, the thing that erased civilizations was experiencing what it had inflicted on countless others. And it couldn't survive it. The core ruptured. The light surged. And then, everything ended. No explosion. No debris. No aftermath. Just absence. Where the silence had been. There was nothing. The battlefield went still. Truly still. No enemy signals. No distortions. No impossible physics tearing reality apart. Just stars. Cold. Distant. Silent. Veka stood frozen, her mind struggling to accept what her eyes were seeing. "Scan," she said quietly. No one moved. "Scan," she repeated louder this time. Systems came back to life one by one, sensors sweeping the empty void. Searching. Negative on hostile signatures. Residual energy fatting. A long pause. Then, "Commander, it's gone." Gone. The word echoed in her mind. Not driven off. Not hidden. Gone. After everything. After the losses. After the sacrifice. They had done the impossible. They had ended the silence. A wave of exhaustion hit her all at once, nearly bringing her to her knees. Around her, the bridge crew stared at their screens, some in disbelief, others in quiet shock. Across open comms, fragments of voices began to rise. Human, alien, different languages, same emotion. "Is it over? We made it. We're still here." Veka closed her eyes briefly. Yes, they were, but not all of them. Her gaze shifted back to the void where the core had collapsed, where Ward had gone in, where the light had consumed everything. "Search for survivors," she said softly. A beat. Then her voice hardened. "Everywhere." Time passed. Minutes. Then more. Ships regrouped slowly, damaged vessels linking with support units. Rescue teams deploying into the debris fields left behind. Picking up life signs, an officer reported. Human vessels. Yes, and ours. Relief flickered across the bridge. "Any sign of the flagship?" Veka asked. A pause. Longer this time. No confirmation. Her chest tightened. Of course not. The core had been ground zero. Nothing should have survived that. And yet, she couldn't let it go. "Keep looking," she said. "We are." More time passed. Hope began to fade. Until, "Commander." The sharpness in the officer's voice cut through everything. Veka turned instantly. "Report." "We have a signal, faint, unstable, coming from the collapse point." Her heart pounded. "Identify." "Unknown configuration, heavily degraded, but..." "Say it." The officer swallowed. "It matches human command signatures." The bridge went silent. Veka stepped closer, her voice barely above a whisper. "Put it through." Static filled the air. Broken. Fragmented. Almost lost. Then, a voice, weak, fading, but unmistakable. "This is Ward." The signal crackled violently, cutting in and out. "Anyone still out there?" Veka's breath caught. For a moment, she couldn't speak. Then, she leaned forward, her voice steady despite everything. "Yes," she said. Across the void. Across the silence that no longer ruled. "Yes, Admiral." A pause, as if the universe itself was listening. Then she finished. "We're still here. They found him where nothing should have existed." At the exact point where the silence had collapsed, where space itself still felt, thin, rescue teams detected the faintest distortion. Not a ship, not debris. A fragment, barely holding together. "Careful," Veka ordered as recovery vessels approached. "Whatever survived that shouldn't have." The object rotated slowly, its surface scorched, fractured, and warped beyond recognition. It was only when they matched the remaining structure to human schematics that the truth settled in. It was what remained of Ward's flagship, or what the universe had allowed to be left of it. "Life signs?" she asked. A tense pause. Then, "Want." The word hit harder than any battle. "Want." Out of all those who went in. "Want." "Get him out," Veka said immediately. The recovery was delicate, almost surgical. The wreckage threatened to collapse further with every movement, as if reality still hadn't fully decided whether it belonged there. Inside, they found him. Admiral Elias Ward. Unconscious, broken, sustained by systems that had no right still functioning. But alive. Barely. "Stabilize him," the med officer shouted. "We're losing him. No, wait, he's holding." Veka stood just outside the med bay as they worked, her claws flexing at her sides. She had commanded fleets, led wars, faced extinction. But this, waiting, felt harder than all of it. "Status," she demanded as the doors finally opened. The med officer hesitated, then answered carefully. "He should not be alive." "That's not an answer. It's the only one I have." A pause. Then, "He's stable for now." Veka exhaled slowly. For now was enough. Weeks passed. The battlefield became a memory, then a scar, then something the galaxy began to speak of in quiet, disbelieving tones. Worlds that had prepared for extinction now reached outward instead. Signals spread. Not warnings. Not distress calls. Something new. Contact. Hope. And at the center of it all, a single question remained. Why? Ward woke slowly. Not with panic. Not with confusion. But with the quiet awareness of someone who had expected not to wake at all. The first thing he saw was light. Real light. Not the broken, distorted glow from inside the silence. Then, stars. He turned his head slightly. A figure stood beside him. Commander Veka. "You're late," she said. His lips curved faintly. "I was busy." She studied him for a long moment, her gaze sharper now, but different. Less guarded. More understanding. "You should be dead," she said. Ward let out a quiet breath. "Yeah, that seems to be a recurring opinion." Silence settled between them, not uncomfortable but heavy with everything that had passed. Finally, she spoke. "You lost your fleet." He didn't look away from the stars. "We all did." A pause. Then she asked the question that had followed her since the moment his signal answered theirs. "Why did you come?" Ward didn't answer immediately. For the first time, there was hesitation. Not doubt. Memory. "When we first reached the stars," he said slowly, "we thought we'd find others like us." Veka listened. Stronger, older, ready to guide us. His gaze drifted. "We were wronged." The words were simple, but they carried something deeper. "We called out," he continued, "sent signals, messages, everything we had." A faint smile touched his expression. "No one answered." Veka felt something tighten in her chest. The same silence. The same emptiness. So we learned, Ward said, the hard way. His eyes met hers. If something's out there, it won't always come to save you. A long pause. Then, so we made a decision. Veka didn't speak. Didn't interrupt. Because she already knew this part mattered. If we ever heard that call, Ward said quietly, we'd be the ones who answered. The weight of it settled between them. Not pride. Not heroism. Choice. Deliberate. Unavoidable. Veka looked out at the stars. Different now. Not empty. Not silent. Connected. You changed something, she said. Ward shook his head slightly. No. A faint pause. We reminded it of something. She turned what? He looked back at the void where the silence had once existed. That it's not the only thing out there anymore. Beyond known space. Far past the systems that now whispered humanity's name. Something moved. Not like the silence. Not chaotic. Not mindless. Ancient. Observing. Waiting. It had watched the battle. Watched the impossible. A species that should have been insignificant. Stand against extinction. And make it hesitate. For the first time in a very long time. It felt something new. Not fear. Not anger. Curiosity. And in the vast darkness between galaxies, that curiosity began to turn. Toward humanity. Back among the stars. Signals continued to rise. Voices reaching out. Worlds connecting.